On the day of my brother's wedding, I witnessed my husband and my future sister-in-law sharing a moment of secret passion in a dark corner. But instead of causing a scene right then and there, I joined forces with my brother to turn that day of celebration into a stage for unforgettable revelations, making them lose everything in a matter of hours. How could a groom, betrayed by his own fiancée, maintain such composure? My story might seem unbelievable to many, but it is the bitter, raw truth I had to live through. It was a sun-drenched day. The five-star hotel ballroom was a vision, adorned with lavish white silk ribbons and an abundance of fresh flowers. Dazzling crystal chandeliers cast a brilliant light over everything, making the scene sparkle like something out of a fairy tale. Soft music and words of blessing filled the air. Today was the big day for my brother, Xavier, and my future sister-in-law, Helen. As the groom's sister, Isabella, I couldn't hide my happiness and pride. Standing in a corner of the banquet hall, I smiled as I watched my brother in his impeccable tuxedo. His handsome face was glowing with happiness. He's 5 years older than me, and since we were little, he has always looked after and protected me. After our parents passed away prematurely, he was a father, a friend, my entire world. Seeing that he had found a lifelong haven with a woman as beautiful and sweet as Helen filled my heart with infinite warmth. Helen had a fragile, delicate appearance. She spoke in a soft voice and always looked at my brother with admiration. During their engagement, she treated me like a real sister. I thought our small family was finally complete and that I, too, had found my own happiness. My husband, Mark, stood beside me, his arm wrapped securely around my waist. He was a gifted architect and, in my eyes and everyone else's, the perfect man. We had been married for 5 years and had a marriage that was the envy of everyone. He was always tender and attentive, my pillar of support through every storm. He gently squeezed my hand and whispered in my ear, "Your brother looks incredible today, and your sister-in-law is a dream. They're a match made in heaven." I smiled, leaning my head on his shoulder, feeling the familiar sense of calm. Yes, I hope they'll be as happy as we are. I sincerely believed I was the luckiest woman in the world. I had a brother who adored me, a wonderful husband, and soon, a lovely sister-in-law. I was living in a rose-colored bubble, until a few minutes later, when I popped it with my own hands. The ceremony was about to begin. I suddenly realized that my husband had disappeared a short while ago. I wanted to take a picture with the bride and groom before they went on stage. I looked around but couldn't see his familiar figure. I thought maybe he had stepped out to take a call, so I walked alone toward the end of the hall, where there was a small balcony overlooking the hotel's back garden. It was a rather quiet spot, so I assumed he might be there. As I got closer, I heard whispers mixed with a woman's giggle. That voice was all too familiar. I slowed my pace, and my heart suddenly began to beat a little faster. Through the crack of the open glass door leading to the balcony, I saw a scene that made my blood run cold. My husband, Mark, was there, and the woman he was holding in his arms, kissing her passionately, was none other than the bride of the day, Helen, my future sister-in-law. She was still wearing her pristine wedding dress, but now it seemed incredibly disgusting and hypocritical to me. Time seemed to stand still. My ears went deaf, all the sounds around me disappeared, and I could only hear the sound of my heart shattering into pieces. I leaned heavily against the cold wall to keep from collapsing. A lump formed in my throat, and a wave of nausea rose in my chest. And then their conversation reached my ears. Every word was like a sharp knife, mercilessly stabbing the last shred of hope I had left. "You're bold, honey, meeting here at a time like this." Helen's voice was flirtatious. Her hands were still wrapped around Mark's neck. Mark scoffed. A laugh I had never seen from him, filled with arrogance and disdain. "What are you afraid of? No one would ever imagine. Look at that fool's family, busy as puppets. And her brother, that Xavier guy, is just a lovesick idiot. We've got it all under control." That fool referred to me. A lovesick idiot referred to my brother. I clenched my fists tightly. My nails dug into my flesh, but I felt no pain. "Still, I'm a little nervous," Helen continued. "What if everything is discovered later? Besides, I don't like the idea of living with you and your wife." Mark laughed again, this time with contempt. "You don't have to be jealous of that little girl. I only married her for the status of being the daughter of a respectable, cultured family, to fool the world. She's nothing more than a baby-making machine, my shield. As soon as she gives me a child, I'll find a way to get rid of her. Soon, all of Xavier's fortune will be ours, and then you can have whatever you want, my love." My love. Those 2 words struck me like a bolt of lightning. I couldn't bear it anymore. My world, my beliefs, 5 years of love, it had all been shattered. In an instant, I turned around and started walking like an automaton. I didn't know where I was going. Tears streamed down my face, but I didn't have the courage to cry out loud. I only felt disgust, a deep-seated disgust. Stumbling along, my mind blank, I bumped into someone. Lifting my head, through my tear-blurred vision, I saw a figure. It was my brother, the groom of the day. Xavier, seeing my wretched state, furrowed his handsome brows slightly. "Isabella, what's wrong? Did something happen?" I couldn't hold back any longer. I threw my arms around him and broke down in tears. Between choked sobs, I told him everything I had just seen and heard. I expected him to be furious, to run to that balcony and destroy everything, to call off the wedding immediately. But he just listened to me in silence, gently patting my back with his large hand. When I stopped crying, he gently pushed me away and looked me straight in the eyes. There was no surprise or anger on his face, only a terrifying calm. He carefully wiped my tears and then gave me a wink, a meaningful gesture that only we, as siblings, understood. He whispered in my ear a phrase I will never forget: "Stay calm. The main act is about to begin." My brother Xavier's words struck me like a lightning bolt, leaving me so stunned I even forgot to cry. The main act? In such a critical situation, when my dear brother was being betrayed on his wedding day, by his fiancée and my husband, how could he say something like that so calmly? My mind was a mess. I thought perhaps the shock had been so great that he had lost his mind. Seeing me still standing there, dazed, Xavier said nothing more. He simply took my hand firmly and led me toward the end of the hall, to the groom's waiting room. He looked around cautiously, and only after making sure no one was there, he pushed me inside and locked the door. The room was decorated with white ribbons and balloons, but the air inside was heavy and tense, almost suffocating. "Isabella, listen to me carefully." Xavier turned and looked me straight in the eye. His expression was no longer one of terrifying calm, it was the serious, cold determination I only saw when he was making important business decisions. "I've known about this for a long time." I froze once again. "For a long time? How? How was that possible?" Xavier sighed and pulled a chair for me to sit on. "It was 3 months ago," he began to explain. "I started to notice something wasn't right. That woman, Helen, showed an excessive interest in our company's operations. She frequently asked about projects or the financial situation, details a fiancé normally wouldn't be so concerned about. And your husband, Mark, acted with an abnormal familiarity around her. Subtle glances, small gestures, things that only those involved would notice." A knot formed in my chest. While I had been blinded by happiness, my brother had been quietly detecting the dangerous undercurrents. "I had a bad feeling," he continued. "So I secretly hired a private investigator, and what they discovered was far more terrible than I had imagined. It wasn't just an affair, Isabella. Behind it all was a meticulously calculated conspiracy." Xavier opened his phone and showed me several photos and documents. They were pictures of Mark and Helen on secret dates at luxurious places. There were also bank statements showing large sums of money transferred from an unidentified account to Helen's. And what horrified me most was a detailed plan found in Mark's emails. The plan was organized in phases. First, Helen would seduce my brother with her beauty and false sweetness to marry him and officially become part of our family. At the same time, Mark, as my husband, would use my trust to gradually leak internal company information. Their ultimate goal was that after the wedding, Helen would convince Xavier to entrust Mark with the management of several major projects. That way, they could conspire to embezzle company funds, create ghost debts, and finally, bankrupt the company our parents left us to take everything for themselves. I felt the blood freeze in my veins. My 5 years of marriage, the love I had cultivated, it had all been just a move in their plan. Mark didn't love me, he had only used me as a pawn and a tool to carry out his dirty conspiracy. The romantic betrayal now turned into a deep hatred. They had not only trampled on my feelings but had also tried to destroy our parents' life's work. "Then why? Why did you go through with this wedding knowing everything?" I asked, looking up at my brother. My voice trembled. Xavier looked at me, and a sharp glint crossed his eyes. "If I had broken off the engagement, we would have only caught 2 small fish, Mark and Helen. The one pulling the strings from the shadows would have never been revealed. Besides, we didn't have enough evidence to expose their entire conspiracy. My brother decided to turn the wedding itself into a trap, a grand stage where everyone could witness the play together." Xavier squeezed my hand. "I have everything prepared, Isabella. The company's important assets have been transferred to a secure trust. The projects they're interested in are just shell projects with no value, and I've installed recorders and cameras everywhere. We just have to wait for them to expose themselves. I looked at my brother, feeling both pity and admiration. He had endured all of this alone, planning and counterattacking while I was still happy in my fake, rose-colored world. Now I need you. Xavier's voice became more serious than ever. Your appearance, the fact that you discovered the truth at this moment, is a variable they didn't expect. But that will become our ace in the hole. Mark and Helen will only see you as a poor wife hurt by betrayal. They will never suspect you. Right now, keep playing that role. Keep crying. Pretend to be heartbroken. The more miserable you look, the better. Can you do it? I quickly wiped my tears. The pain still burned in my chest, but it had now transformed into the flames of hatred. My brother was right. This was not the time to be weak. I was not just crying over my husband's betrayal, I had to fight for justice for our entire family. I can do it, I nodded, my voice much firmer. Just then, there was a knock on the door. Mr. Sawyer, it's time for the ceremony to begin. It was the event planner's voice. Xavier stood up and adjusted his bow tie. He looked at me and smiled, a smile full of confidence. All right, little sister, let's go out. The show is about to begin. Remember, you're not alone. Your brother is here. My brother opened the door, and we walked out together. As we reached the main hall, we saw Mark and Helen happily chatting with some guests, arm in arm. Upon seeing Xavier and me, Mark quickly approached with his usual look of concern. Isabella, where were you? I've been looking all over for you. I looked up at him, my eyes still swollen from crying. I said nothing, just shook my head, and moved closer to my brother. Mark seemed a bit puzzled by my coldness but probably chalked it up to fatigue. The music in the wedding hall suddenly became more solemn. The officiant announced in a powerful voice. And now, let's welcome with a warm round of applause today's stars. The groom, Mr. Xavier Sawyer, and the bride, Miss Helen Gascon. All the lights focused on them, and every gaze was filled with admiration. And as my brother, the groom, took that woman's hand, the woman who almost became my sister-in-law, to walk down the aisle, I smiled. My smile was probably the most perfect lie of my life, but it was also the smile that foretold the coming storm. Under the dazzling stage lights, my brother and Helen looked like a perfect couple. Xavier still wore a happy smile, but I knew it was just part of a flawless performance. She pretended to be shy and sweet, occasionally casting loving glances at him. She was an exceptional actress. They walked together down an aisle covered in white roses, to the incessant applause of hundreds of guests. I sat in the front row of the family section with Mark beside me. He still had his arm around my shoulders, whispering sweet nothings to me from time to time. Aren't they beautiful? I hope we'll celebrate such a grand wedding anniversary too. I just leaned on his shoulder in silence, pretending to be captivated by the ceremony's romantic atmosphere. But in reality, I was struggling to suppress the nausea rising in my throat. Every one of his words and actions now disgusted me. His hand on my shoulder, the same hand that had once caressed me tenderly, was the same one that had held another woman just minutes before. The ceremony proceeded according to the usual protocol. The officiant, with his honeyed voice, praised the fated love story and the meeting of two souls. Hearing it, I almost laughed. Fate. Yes, a fate woven with conspiracy and calculation. After the empty speeches, the moment for the exchange of rings finally arrived. An adorable flower girl, dressed in pristine white, came on stage with the wedding rings in a red velvet box. Xavier and Helen faced each other, ready to exchange their symbols of love. One moment. Suddenly, a voice from the audience broke the sacred moment. The entire hall held its breath, and all eyes turned to the person who had just spoken. It was a middle-aged woman. Her attire was quite elegant, but her face was filled with anger and pain. She was accompanied by an older man, likely her husband. I saw Helen on stage flinch slightly, and her face momentarily turned pale. My brother remained calm, as if he had anticipated this woman's appearance. Excuse me, who are you? What's going on? The officiant tried to control the situation. The woman didn't answer, but walked straight onto the stage and stood in front of Helen. Helen, do you recognize me? She said, her voice a mixture of anger and disappointment. Helen took a step back, her face so pale it was drained of blood. Oh, ma'am, how did you get here? Why shouldn't I be here? The woman scoffed bitterly. I came to see how my future daughter-in-law, the one who swore eternal love to my son, is about to become another man's wife. I came to seek justice for my son. A murmur started to spread among the guests. Future daughter-in-law? Son? What was happening? Mark, sitting next to me, was also surprised. What's wrong, Isabella? Who is that woman? He asked me. I just shook my head, pretending to be equally shocked and confused. The woman turned to the guests and raised her voice. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm sorry to interrupt this happy day, but there's something I must say. This young lady on stage, Helen, was my son's fiancée. They were in love for 5 years, celebrated their engagement, and were just waiting for a wedding date. But in just a few months, she changed her mind and left for a richer man, leaving my son in terrible pain. As she finished, she pulled a stack of photos from her purse and threw them on the stage. Photos of Helen with another man in affectionate poses scattered across the floor. There were also pictures from their engagement party. A collective gasp echoed through the hall. Now, all the gazes on the bride were not of admiration, but of curiosity, doubt, and reproach. Helen stood frozen on stage, her face as white as a sheet, trying to explain herself, stammering. No, that's not it. He and I broke up a long time ago. Broke up? The woman sneered again. How shameless. Now you're lying. Just 3 months ago, you took money from my son for shopping and investing. You deceived and used him. How can you betray him like this now? Helen couldn't say anything and looked at Xavier with pleading eyes. But my brother, the groom and the one who should have been the angriest, simply crossed his arms and looked at her with an unfamiliar coldness and distance. I, sitting below, watched the play in silence. I knew this was the first act my brother had prepared. He had found Helen's abandoned ex-boyfriend and invited his mother here. He wanted to rip off Helen's mask of innocence and purity in front of everyone. Seeing the situation spiraling out of control, Helen suddenly clutched her chest, swayed, and collapsed on the stage, feigning a faint. Oh my God, the bride has fainted. Some people shouted. Helen's family, whom I knew were just hired actors, rushed to the stage, creating a chaotic scene. In the midst of it all, Xavier slowly walked over and looked down at the fainted Helen. He showed no concern but instead curled his lip in a slight smile. He took the microphone from the stunned officiant. Ladies and gentlemen, his voice boomed, firm and clear, silencing the entire hall. I'm sorry to have shown you such an unpleasant play, but I believe the truth must always come to light. He looked at Helen, who was peeking at the crowd's reaction. You act very well, Miss Gascon, but I think it's time to end this charade. His words were like a splash of cold water on everyone. Helen, startled, quickly shut her eyes, but it was too late. Everyone had seen her. And to make this play even more interesting, Xavier continued, I'd like to invite another special guest to the stage, someone who is very closely related to this farce. He looked towards where Mark and I were sitting, and my heart began to beat faster. I knew it was our turn to take the stage. The stage lights suddenly swiveled, pointing directly at Mark and me, turning us into the center of attention. Hundreds of pairs of curious and surprised eyes were fixed on the family section. Mark was stunned, not understanding what was happening. He turned to me and whispered in a confused voice. Who is your brother calling? A special guest? I didn't answer, just looked at him with tear-filled eyes, with an innocent and helpless expression. I knew it was my turn to act. On stage, Xavier continued, raising his voice. This time, he addressed my husband directly. The person I want to invite is none other than my brother-in-law, the architect Mark Jimenez. Could you please come up here and share this joy with us? This sudden invitation caused even more of a stir in the hall. People didn't understand why the groom was calling his brother-in-law to the stage at such a delicate moment. Mark was completely paralyzed. He looked at me, then at the stage, and his face turned pale. He probably began to feel that something was very wrong, but faced with his brother-in-law's public invitation and the gaze of hundreds of people, he couldn't refuse. Go on up, honey, I said in a low voice, giving him a gentle push on the back. With an innocent tone, I added, maybe Xavier wants you to share the secret to a happy marriage. My words were like a pinprick, but enough to make Mark flinch. He swallowed hard, and, forcing a smile, slowly stood up and walked toward the stage. Each of his steps seemed to weigh a ton. When Mark got on stage, Xavier put an arm around his shoulders in an affectionate manner and addressed the audience. Ladies and gentlemen, don't you think my brother-in-law is handsome and talented? I'm very proud to have a brother-in-law like him. Not only is he a gifted architect, but also a wonderful husband who deeply loves my sister. Xavier's praise baffled Mark even more. He could only smile awkwardly without saying anything. And perhaps, Xavier continued, his voice suddenly becoming meaningful, he is so perfect that not only does my sister love him, but other women love him too. Isn't that right, my dear bride? Xavier turned toward Helen, who was still lying on the floor pretending to be unconscious. But upon hearing this, I saw her eyelids tremble slightly. Mark's face was now as white as a sheet. He started to sweat cold and tried to shrug off Xavier's arm. "Brother-in-law, what are you saying? Everyone is misunderstanding things." "Misunderstanding?" Xavier laughed out loud, a laugh without any warmth. "Well, let me show everyone what the misunderstanding is." As he finished, Xavier signaled the tech crew. The two huge LED screens on either side of the stage, which had been displaying romantic photos of the couple, suddenly went dark and then lit up again. But this time, the image that appeared was not of roses or candles. It was a video recorded from a hidden angle on the balcony. The entire hall held its breath. The same scene that I had been forced to witness just an hour before unfolded vividly before the eyes of hundreds of people. My husband, Mark, passionately embracing and kissing the bride, Helen, dressed in her immaculate wedding gown. The sound was also recorded with great clarity. Each of their disgusting words echoed throughout the hall. "Look at that fool's family, busy as puppets. And that Xavier guy is just a lovesick idiot. I only married her to fool the world. She's nothing more than a baby-making machine." The entire hall seemed to explode. Shouts, insults, and looks of contempt rained down mercilessly on the two people on stage. The most sordid drama of adultery and betrayal was being projected in the most vivid way possible. Helen could no longer keep up her fainting act. She jumped to her feet, pale and trembling from head to toe. Mark could barely stand. He stumbled back a few steps and, pointing at the screen, babbled. "No, that's not true. It's edited. It's a fake." But his weak words couldn't quell the crowd's anger. "Scum! What a pair of adulterers! I can't believe it." The insults erupted from everywhere. Helen's fake family couldn't continue their act either. They stood paralyzed, their faces red with shame, not knowing what to do. And I was still sitting in the front row. Tears began to well up again. This time, it wasn't an act. They were tears of pain from having to relive that scene and hear those venomous words again in front of so many people. I covered my face with my hands, my shoulders shaking. I had to portray the image of the miserable victim, the wife completely shattered by the cruel truth. On stage, Xavier looked at me, and a flash of sympathy crossed his eyes, but it was quickly replaced by cold determination. He walked over and snatched the microphone from the officiant's hand. "Ladies and gentlemen," he shouted. His voice had an invisible force that instantly silenced the chaotic hall. "Have you all seen it? This is the true face of the woman I was going to marry and the man I once considered my brother-in-law, part of my family." He turned to Mark and Helen, his gaze like two knives. "Do you two have anything else to say? Or do you want me to show you something even more interesting?" Mark and Helen, in despair, could only shake their heads. They were completely cornered, with no way to excuse themselves. But all of this, Xavier continued, his voice becoming even more mysterious and frightening, doesn't end here. This drama of infidelity is actually just the tip of a much larger iceberg. The entire hall fell silent again. Everyone wondered what the groom meant. Xavier pulled a stack of documents from his tuxedo pocket and held it up for everyone to see. What they really wanted wasn't love, but this. What was in that stack of documents? And what connection did it have to the person my brother claimed was pulling the strings from the shadows? All eyes were fixed on the papers in my brother's hand, waiting for an even more terrible truth to be revealed. The stack of documents in Xavier's hand was like a mysterious object that captured everyone's attention. The hall held its breath, waiting to see which way this drama would unfold. Mark and Helen also looked up, and in their desperate eyes, terror was now reflected. They probably knew better than anyone what those papers contained. "Before I tell you what this is," Xavier said in a slow, clear voice, "I'd like to tell you a little story. The story of an old, cunning fox who used two skunks to rob a henhouse." He scanned the room, his gaze piercing through some of the guests seated in the VIP section. I noticed a middle-aged man, with a stout face and dressed in an elegant gray suit, suddenly tense up. He coughed slightly and adjusted his tie. "The fox," Xavier continued, "knew the henhouse was very well protected, so he didn't dare to act on his own. That's why he found two skunks, a male and a female. He promised them a life of abundance, with plenty of food and fine clothes. They just had to help him carry out a plan. The female skunk's mission was to seduce the head rooster, the future owner of the henhouse. The male skunk's mission was to court the head rooster's sister, a naive hen, to become part of the family." Hearing this, I no longer needed to act. The tears flowed for real. My brother's metaphorical story was like another knife twisting in my pain. I was that naive hen. Their ultimate goal, Xavier's voice grew even colder, was, after gaining their trust, to slowly open the gates and break down the fences so the old fox from outside could quietly come in and take over the entire henhouse. Isn't that a perfect plan? He looked directly at Mark and Helen. You two skunks. Does this story sound familiar? Mark and Helen couldn't say a word, just lowered their heads. And this, what I have in my hands, Xavier held up the stack of documents, is the detailed plan and the map the old fox drew for the two skunks. The map that tells them which path to take and where to break the fence. This is the complete plan to take over Sawyer Developments, our parents' life's work. He flipped through the documents one by one, projecting their contents directly onto the large screen. Figures, charts, and dirty business strategies appeared clearly. Their plan was not limited to embezzling company funds, it included creating fake scandals, undermining Xavier's credibility, and fostering internal divisions to finally create the conditions for a competitor to acquire Sawyer Developments at a bargain price. And the name of that competitor was also written in plain sight. Apex Holdings. The hall erupted in murmurs again. Apex Holdings was not an unknown name in the business world. It was an emerging force that had risen rapidly with bold and controversial moves. And the man in the gray suit, who had shown strange behavior earlier, was none other than the CEO of Apex Holdings, Mr. Morales. Now, all eyes turned to him. Mr. Morales turned pale but tried to maintain his composure. He stood up, straightened his clothes, and tried to leave the hall. Mr. Morales, where are you going in such a rush? Xavier's voice was like an invisible rope tying his ankles. The best part is yet to come. You wouldn't want to miss it. Mr. Morales turned and forced a clumsy business smile. Mr. Sawyer, I think there's a misunderstanding. I have nothing to do with your company's internal affairs. Nothing to do? Xavier laughed coldly. Then how do you explain your secret meetings with these two people? And the money you sent Miss Gascon so she could pose as a rich girl? And the promise of a project director position to Mr. Jimenez if everything went well? Each of Xavier's questions was a heavy blow that left Mr. Morales barely able to stand. I knew my brother wasn't just talking, he had all the evidence in his hands. Just then, two men in plain clothes, who looked like detectives slowly approached Mr. Morales's table. They said nothing, just stared at him with a solemn gaze. Mr. Morales realized all his escape routes were blocked. He collapsed into his chair, his forehead drenched in sweat. The elaborate play he had constructed was about to end. The old fox had finally been cornered. I, sitting below, watched it all. My heart was no longer filled with personal pain but with anger at the vileness and cruelty of the business world. For profit, they were capable of trampling on everything: love, family ties, even human decency. My husband, Mark, whom I had once loved madly, was just a pawn on someone else's chessboard. He had sold his soul for an empty promise. He looked at me, and in his eyes, there was no longer shamelessness, but an extreme emptiness and despair. He had lost everything: love, honor, and his future. On stage, after exposing the entire conspiracy, Xavier turned to me. He walked in my direction without saying a word and held out his hand. I took his hand, and we walked onto the stage together. He took the microphone, and his voice was no longer sharp but softened with a touch of compassion. Ladies and gentlemen, the person most hurt in this story is not me, but my sister, Isabella. This girl has had to endure the deceit and betrayal of the man she deeply loved. She is completely innocent. He turned to me, and with a look full of love, said, Isabella, I'm sorry. I'm sorry you had to go through this. I should have realized sooner. I should have protected you better. I just shook my head, and the tears started flowing again, but this time they were tears of emotion and gratitude. Today's wedding, Xavier continued, will have no bride, but the party will go on. I hope all our distinguished guests will stay and consider this a party to celebrate the truth. The entire hall erupted in applause. They weren't clapping for a wedding, but for courage and the victory of justice. Just when I thought it was all over, a sharp scream came from the bride who was slumped on the floor. Helen leaped up, pulled a sharp hairpin from her hairdo, and with a crazed look, lunged at me. It's your fault. This is all your fault. Helen's crazed action was so swift and sudden that it left everyone stunned. The hairpin, glinting under the stage lights, flew towards me like a poisoned arrow. I stood frozen, my mind blank. I registered the imminent danger but couldn't react. Xavier, beside me, didn't have time to intervene either. When the tip of the hairpin was just inches from my face, a shadow shot out from behind me like a flash. It was none other than Mark. He threw his entire body in front of me. The sharp tip of the hairpin grazed his shoulder, leaving a red bloodstain on his white shirt. Ah! Mark cried out in pain, staggering back. Helen seemed shocked by her own action and by Mark's reaction. She dropped the hairpin and stood there, dazed, her face pale. It was then that the hotel's security guards rushed to subdue her and took her away. The hall was once again in chaos. Xavier ran to help Mark. "Are you okay?" Mark, his face contorted in pain, shook his head. He didn't look at Xavier, but at me. His gaze was very complex. There was regret, pain, and somehow, a kind of relief. "Isabella, are you okay?" I looked at the blood stain on his shoulder, my heart filled with mixed emotions. Why had he done it? How could the man who had mercilessly deceived and used me risk his life to protect me? Or was this another act? An attempt to gain my last ounce of compassion? "Get him to the infirmary, immediately." Xavier ordered the hotel staff. As Mark was taken away, the two plainclothes detectives also led Mr. Morales away. The CEO of Apex Holdings no longer looked imposing. He was just a defeated old man, walking with his head down amidst the accusations and contempt of the people. The wedding farce had finally come to an end. Xavier took the microphone again and tried to calm the guests. "Ladies and gentlemen, once again, I apologize for the unexpected incident. Our party will have to end here. On behalf of my family, I sincerely thank you all for your attendance." The guests began to leave one by one, taking with them an unforgettable story. What had been a splendid wedding hall now looked desolate and cold, like ruins. Xavier and I stood silently in the empty space. An extreme exhaustion washed over us. "It's all over, Isabella," Xavier said, gently patting my shoulder. I nodded, but a big question remained in my mind. "Brother, how did you know everything? The company acquisition plan, Mr. Morales's role. How did you know?" Xavier looked at me and gave a sad smile. "Because I wasn't the only one who wanted to unmask him. My brother told me another story, one that had been hidden for years. Before he passed away, our father was a close friend and business partner of Mr. Morales. Together, they laid the first bricks for both of their companies. But it was that same Mr. Morales who, with dirty tricks, cheated our father out of all his shares and drove him to bankruptcy. That blow made our father fall ill, and shortly after, his health deteriorated, and he passed away. I always had my doubts about my father's death." Xavier's voice grew heavier. "After inheriting the company, I started investigating secretly and gradually found evidence of his crimes. But he was too cunning and covered all his tracks skillfully. I never had enough evidence to take him down. Until Helen appeared," my brother continued. "At first, I too was deceived by her innocent appearance. But I noticed there were too many coincidences. She would always casually mention projects where Apex Holdings was competing with us. So I had her investigated and discovered the connection between her and Mr. Morales. I realized he was trying to repeat the same script with me as he did with my father, and I decided this was my chance to avenge our father." Hearing this, I felt a lump in my throat. Behind the company's success, my brother had been carrying such a heavy burden of revenge. He had had to live a lie, acting with the woman he was supposed to marry, waiting for the day he could bring down his enemy. "So, everything was in your plan?" "Most of it, yes," Xavier nodded. "Except for one thing. I didn't know your husband was also part of his plan, let alone that you would be the spark for all of this. Your appearance, your courage, was the unexpected variable, the decisive blow that made him fall without giving him time to react." My brother looked at me with pride. "My little sister, you've really grown up." I managed a smile through my tears. "We had won, together, as siblings. We had won." Shortly after, a hotel employee came to inform us that Mark had received first aid. The wound wasn't deep, but he needed to go to the hospital for a tetanus shot and a more thorough checkup. He said he wanted to talk to me alone for a moment before he left. I hesitated for a bit but finally nodded. In the end, I wanted to know if there was any sincerity left in him. I entered the infirmary. Mark was sitting on a cot, his shoulder bandaged. It looked disheveled. His designer suit was wrinkled and discarded, his shirt stained with blood, and his face lacked all vitality. When he saw me, he looked up with a guilt-ridden gaze. I'm sorry, Isabella. What good is an apology now?" I asked coldly. "I don't expect you to forgive me," he said, lowering his head. "I just wanted to tell you one thing. The moment I jumped to protect you was sincere. It wasn't an act." I looked at him in silence. "For the past 5 years," he continued in a hoarse voice, "I've been living a lie. I approached you because of Mr. Morales's plan, for the money. But then, I started to have real feelings for you. Your sweetness, your kindness. It moved my heart, but I was in too deep. I couldn't turn back. I wanted you, and I also wanted the money and status. Greed clouded my judgment. He looked up at me, and tears began to well in his eyes. Today, facing danger, I realized. The only thing I wanted to protect was you. But it's too late for everything. I listened to his belated confession without any emotion in my heart. Love? Perhaps there was some. But the betrayal and the harm he caused me had killed that love. Save those words for the judge, I said, my voice expressionless. Between us, everything is over. I turned and walked out, leaving him alone with his regret and his late tears. The moment the infirmary door closed, the door to my 5 years of marriage also officially closed, forever. A week after the stormy wedding, things gradually began to calm down, but the aftermath was still enormous. The Apex Holdings case became a scandal that shook the business world. Mr. Morales, Helen, and several other senior executives were arrested and investigated for fraud, embezzlement, and industrial espionage. Despite his act of saving me, Mark could not escape his involvement. As a key part of the plan, he was summoned to testify and faced inevitable justice. I filed for divorce, and the whole process was carried out quickly and without dispute. We decided to sell our house, our only valuable shared asset. I didn't want to keep anything that reminded me of a past filled with lies. After everything was settled, I felt I needed some time for myself. I decided to take a trip alone, to go somewhere far away to clear my head and start a new life. I chose Napa Valley, California, a place calm enough to heal my wounds. During my days in Napa, I didn't visit many places. I simply spent my time walking along quiet country roads, sitting in small, charming cafes, reading and writing. After so many storms, I realized that what I truly needed was peace of mind. One cool afternoon, as I was sitting in a rustic wooden cafe overlooking a vineyard, sketching out ideas for a new company project, a familiar voice sounded beside me. Well, small world. I looked up, surprised. It was the police officer who had handled my car accident that day. His sudden appearance was a bit baffling. He was no longer in his strict uniform but in a comfortable khaki jacket and jeans. He looked much younger and more approachable. The afternoon breeze gently stirred his dark, thick hair. "Hi." I smiled, trying to hide my surprise. "What a coincidence to see you here. Are you on vacation?" "You could almost say that," he replied, a soft smile revealing a slight dimple. "I was transferred here a few weeks ago. You could say I'm starting a new life. During my days in Napa, I didn't visit many places." He looked much younger and more approachable. "Sorry to interrupt." No, I was just finishing up," I said, quickly closing the notebook. Then he hesitated a bit. "Would you mind if I sit here for a moment? The cafe is very crowded, and this is the only free spot." "You were working." "Yes, of course, please sit." I looked around, and indeed, the small, charming cafe was packed. There was a slightly awkward silence between us. I didn't know what to say, and he also seemed to be looking for a suitable topic of conversation. At the wedding that day, he finally broke the silence. "I saw everything. You were very brave." His words surprised me a little. I thought he had only come to handle the case and was surprised he had noticed other things. "Thank you. Fortunately, it's all over now. I'm David," he introduced himself suddenly. "Isabella," I replied. "Nice to meet you, David." We started talking. At first, it was just light conversation about Napa Valley, work, and personal hobbies, but gradually the conversation deepened. David told me why he had been transferred. After years of working in the stressful environment of New York, he felt exhausted and wanted to live and work in a quieter place. He loved the mountains, the forests, and the fresh air of the valley. I also shared my story, not the painful details of the betrayal, but my decision to leave the city and my desire to find a new balance in life. We realized we had something in common. We were both on a journey to find a new beginning. David was a very engaging person to talk to. He was intelligent and witty, but in his eyes, there was a quiet, deep quality, typical of someone who has seen a lot. Talking with him made me feel very comfortable, a feeling I hadn't experienced in a long time. The sky began to darken, and the warm yellow lights of the cafe turned on, creating a very romantic atmosphere. "I don't know how long we've been talking." "It's getting late," David said, looking at his watch. "I have to get back to the station." "It was a pleasure talking to you, Isabella." "You too," I smiled. "Oh, this weekend," he hesitated again. I'm planning a hike in the Sierra foothills. I was wondering. If you're not busy, would you like to come? His invitation made my heart skip a beat. Hiking? I've never done it. All the more reason you should try, he smiled. The air there is incredible. It helps release all the stress. I thought for a moment and then nodded. Yes, I'd love to. After that chance encounter, David and I had our first date. We hiked in the mountains together, walked through vast pine forests, and discovered hidden little restaurants in the alleys of nearby towns. With David by my side, I was no longer the woman who had to be strong, the one who had to be wary of everyone. He gave me a strange sense of security and peace. He didn't ask about my past or make me relive painful memories. He just stayed by my side in silence, sharing life's small joys with me. The feelings between us grew naturally and gently, like the morning mist in Napa Valley. One evening, as we were sitting by a quiet lake, watching it reflect the moonlight, David suddenly took my hand. Isabella, his voice was deep and warm. I know you've been through a lot. I don't want to reopen old wounds. I just want to tell you that, if you'll let me. I'd like to be the person who writes a new chapter of your life with you, a chapter filled with joy and happiness. I looked into his sincere eyes, and my heart was moved. Tears welled up again, but this time they were tears of happiness. I said nothing, just nodded and squeezed his warm hand tightly. 2 years later. Mommy, hurry up. Daddy and Uncle Xavier are waiting outside. My little daughter Clara's cheerful voice called from the door. I smiled and adjusted the bow in her hair. Mommy's coming, my princess. I looked at myself in the mirror. I saw the image of a woman radiant with happiness. Today was a special day. It was my first wedding anniversary with David, and also the day the whole family was going to New York to attend the opening of a new branch of Sawyer Developments. My life had completely changed. After that fateful trip to Napa Valley, I found the true love and happiness of my life. David, after we had been dating for a while, decided to request a transfer back to New York to be by my side. He said that wherever I was, that's where his peace would be. We had a small, warm wedding on the beach, with just our loved ones. My brother Xavier also found his own happiness after all the storms. He fell in love with a kind teacher, Grace, and they recently had their first child, a healthy baby boy named Leo. Sawyer Developments, under Xavier's leadership and with my support, grew spectacularly, becoming one of the leading companies in its sector. As the car drove along the familiar highway, Clara sat on my lap, chattering and pointing at everything she saw out the window. David, in the driver's seat, would occasionally turn to look at me and our daughter with a gaze full of love. When the car passed a large state prison, I suddenly fell silent. I knew that inside there were people paying for their mistakes. I had heard that Mark was going to get an early release soon for good behavior. I also heard that Helen had suffered a real mental breakdown and had been moved to a psychiatric hospital for treatment. And Mr. Morales, old and sick, finally broke down behind bars. I no longer hated them. My heart was now filled with peace. All the hatred had been left behind, and love and forgiveness had taken its place. The opening party was a great success. Amidst the bustling atmosphere, I received a beautiful bouquet of white roses with no sender's name. Inside was a small card with the shaky handwriting of an older person. Congratulations. May you be very happy. I knew who it was from. Probably someone, somewhere, was watching me and sincerely wishing me the best. That night after the party, when Clara was fast asleep, David and I stood on the hotel balcony, looking at the bright lights of the New York night. He hugged me from behind and rested his chin on my shoulder. Thank you, he whispered, for coming into my life, for making my days meaningful. I smiled, turned around, and rested my head on his firm chest. I should be the one who is more grateful. Thank you for healing all the wounds within me. We held each other in silence, fully feeling the happiness of the present. Life is truly like a long journey with countless unpredictable forks in the road. There were times when I thought I had fallen into the abyss of despair, but it was in the darkest place that I found the light of my life. A new beginning, a new happiness. It was all here, in my arms. After the trip to New York, we returned to our quiet routine. Our small house was once again filled with Clara's laughter and the warmth of family. My brother Xavier also came over often on weekends with his wife, Grace, and their son, Leo. Watching my daughter and my nephew play together, I felt my heart heal completely. The past seemed very distant, just an old story I remembered from time to time. The anonymous white roses and the card from the opening, I just considered them a belated apology from one of Mark's relatives. I didn't want to think about it or give it any more importance. I tucked the card into a corner of a drawer and locked it, as if closing an old chapter of my life. But life isn't always as calm as a lake. The first ripples began to form so subtly that at first, I thought it was just my hypersensitivity due to everything I'd been through. Sometimes, while driving down the street, I'd get the feeling that a familiar black SUV was following me. But when I looked closer in the rearview mirror, the car would disappear into traffic. Once, while playing with Clara in a park near our house, I felt a fixed gaze on me and my daughter from a distant bench. It was a middle-aged woman, dressed very elegantly, with a wide-brimmed hat and sunglasses covering part of her face. When I looked at her again, she immediately turned her head and left the park in a hurry. When I told David about this, he just laughed and hugged me. "You're overthinking things again. You're a successful and beautiful executive now. It's normal for some admirer to be looking at you." But I knew my husband was just saying that to reassure me. His police instincts had him silently on alert too. "I'll check the security cameras around the house," he added. "It never hurts to be careful." That incident was also soon forgotten, until Clara's second birthday. The party was an intimate one at home, just with Xavier's family, us, and a few close friends. While everyone was happily singing happy birthday, the doorbell suddenly rang. David went to open it and came back with a beautifully wrapped gift box in his hand, but his expression was a little strange. "It's from a courier service," he said. "A gift for Clara, but there's no sender's name." We were all surprised. I took the gift box, and a vague unease washed over me. The box was wrapped in high-quality gift paper, tied with an elaborate pink silk ribbon. Clearly, the sender had put a lot of care into it. Could it be from a business partner who appreciates you? Xavier Guest. I thought so too. It was probably a business gift. I carefully opened the box under everyone's curious gazes. Inside, on a soft velvet lining, lay a small, beautiful white gold bracelet, exquisitely made. The charm on the bracelet was a finely carved lotus flower, with a tiny diamond in the center that sparkled under the light. It was a very valuable gift, but what made me freeze was not its value, but the small card that came with it. The handwriting on the card was soft, elegant, and very familiar. I opened the card with trembling hands, and inside was a single short line: "Happy birthday to our little one, from her grandmother." Our little one, from her grandmother. The word grandmother was like a thunderbolt that struck my mind. Who was this grandmother? My mother had passed away. My mother-in-law, David's mother, lives in the countryside and doesn't have such refined handwriting, let alone my shaky ex-mother-in-law. I took the card and compared it to the handwriting on the card from the white roses I received at the opening. They were identical. It was the same person, a person who called herself my daughter's grandmother. "Isabella, what's wrong? You're white as a sheet," David said, shaking my shoulder with concern. I didn't answer, just showed him the card. David read the card, and then furrowed his handsome brows. He picked up the bracelet and examined it carefully. "This is very strange," he said. "Who is this person? How does she know Clara's birthday and send such an expensive gift?" I sank into a chair, my mind in a turmoil. Scattered images suddenly came to mind: the black SUV following me, the mysterious woman in the park, the anonymous white roses, and now a white gold bracelet with a note from her grandmother. All of this was no coincidence. Someone, a woman, was silently watching my life and my daughter's. She knew a lot about us, was very wealthy, and called herself Clara's grandmother. But how was that possible? My mother, Carmen, had passed away years ago in a terrible car accident. I had seen the photo from her funeral myself, and together with Xavier, we had held her burial. There could be no mistake. So, who was this woman? A distant relative I didn't know? Or a much more terrible secret I had no idea about? I looked at my little daughter. Clara was still laughing and babbling innocently, completely unaware of the storm silently gathering around her. A knot formed in my chest. I would not let anyone harm my daughter. I had to find out the truth. Whoever this mysterious woman was, whatever her purpose, I had to find her. The quiet life I had worked so hard to achieve seemed to be facing a new storm, a storm blowing from the very past I thought I knew so well. The mysterious birthday gift completely shattered the cheerful party atmosphere. After all the guests left, only our family and Xavier's remained. My brother examined the bracelet, his face as serious as mine. "This is no simple matter," he said quietly. "A custom baby bracelet like this, white gold with a diamond. It must have cost several $1,000s. This person is not ordinary." My sister-in-law, Grace, a wise and gentle woman, also spoke up. "Couldn't it be someone from your ex-husband's family, Isabella? Maybe they're trying to get close to the child that way." "Impossible," I shook my head firmly. "They have no reason to, and more importantly, this isn't their handwriting." David remained silent for a while, deep in thought, and finally spoke with the seriousness of a police officer. The first thing we need to do is trace the origin of this gift. I'll take the box and wrapping to the forensics lab. Maybe we'll find fingerprints or other clues. And I'll review all the security cameras on the streets near our house today to track the courier's vehicle. Xavier nodded in agreement. Right. I'll also use my contacts to ask major jewelers if anyone recognizes this bracelet design. The lotus design is quite unique. It's likely a custom order. Our conversation hit a dead end. Although we considered several hypotheses, none could explain the appearance of this person who called herself grandmother. That night, I couldn't sleep a wink. I hugged my little daughter, gazing at her sleeping face. An invisible fear enveloped me. Who was this woman? What did she want from my daughter? Did she have ill intentions? The following days passed in a state of anxiety and worry. David and Xavier did their best to investigate, but all leads seemed to hit a dead end. The courier service was a small company, and the sender had paid in cash and used a fake name. The security cameras only showed an ordinary delivery person, nothing special. No jeweler recognized the bracelet's design. The mysterious woman seemed to have calculated everything meticulously, leaving no trace behind. Seeing the investigation stalled, I grew even more anxious. I decided I couldn't just wait passively anymore. I had to find the answers myself. I decided to start with my past, with what I knew about my mother. I took a few days off work, left Clara with my mother-in-law, and returned alone to my parents' old house in the town where my brother and I grew up. It had been a long time since I'd been back. The house was still the same, covered in the dust of time, but every corner evoked warm memories of my mother. I started cleaning out the attic, where my mother kept old things and family mementos. I hoped to find, among those seemingly insignificant items, some clue about the mysterious woman, some secret my mother had never told us. I flipped through old photo albums one by one. Black and white photos, faded color photos. My mother, beautiful and radiant in her youth. My parents, happy on their wedding day. And photos of Xavier and me as children, smiling innocently in our parents' arms. I went through them again and again but saw no luxuriously dressed, unfamiliar woman. Just as I was about to give up, my hand brushed against a small wooden box hidden at the bottom of an old trunk. The box was locked with a small, rusty padlock. After struggling for a while, I managed to pry it open. Inside, there were no jewels or money, but a stack of yellowed letters, carefully tied with a purple ribbon. I picked up the stack of letters with trembling hands. The handwriting was neither my mother's nor my father's. It was the handwriting of a woman, soft, elegant, and identical to the one on Clara's birthday card. My heart stopped. I quickly opened the first letter. My dear sister Carmen, a year has passed since that fateful day. I still can't forget how you saved me from that car, moments before it exploded. I don't know how I can ever repay you for this favor. I'm sending a small gift, please accept it. I know you'll refuse, but please don't. Consider it a small token from me for the 2 children you have at home. I must leave now. I can't stay in this place that has taken everything from me. Perhaps one day, when everything has settled, we will meet again. With all my love, Adrian. I reread the letter several times, my mind a mess. Sister Carmen, that was undoubtedly my mother. A car accident, a rescue. My mother had never told us this story. And Adrian, who was this woman? Why did she write to my mother? I quickly read the next letters. They were letters sent from abroad, from France and Switzerland. Adrian told my mother about her new life, her loneliness, the torment of having to leave her home. She always asked about Xavier and me, and always sent us expensive gifts my mother probably never told us we had. The last letter was dated about 5 years ago, and the handwriting was a bit shakier. Sister Carmen, I believe I don't have much time left. This illness has tormented me for too long. My only regret is that I never came back to care for my 2 children. I know I don't deserve to. I abandoned them. But please, sister, love them for me. Tell them that wherever she is, their mother will always be watching over and loving them. I am sending you this key. It is the key to a personal safe deposit box in a Swiss bank. Inside is all the fortune I have amassed. Please, give it to my children when they are older. Consider it the final compensation from a sinful mother. Goodbye. My sister, my friend, and my savior. Adrienne. The letter fell from my hands. My whole body was trembling. Children, mother. The whole truth, an incredible truth, was slowly revealing itself before my eyes. This woman, Adrienne, she was. No, it couldn't be. My mother was Carmen Sawyer, and she was dead. There had to be a mistake. But this stack of letters, this key, and the familiar handwriting. I sat there, stunned, in the middle of the dusty attic, my mind filled with confusion. The past I knew, the identity I believed in, it all suddenly felt blurry and strange. A huge family secret, a secret buried for over 20 years, was about to be opened. And it was directly related to me. That night, I didn't sleep a minute. The stack of letters from Adrian and the small key lay silently on the desk, but my mind was a whirlwind. Her mother, 2 children. Those phrases repeated over and over, digging deep into my heart. I tried to dismiss the crazy idea that Xavier and I were not the biological children of the woman we had always called Mom. But everything fit together in a terrifying way: the handwriting, the expensive gifts, and calling herself grandmother to Clara. The next morning, I couldn't wait any longer. I had to find Xavier. He had to know too. He was my brother, my only family. He had a right to know the truth about our roots. I drove hastily back to the city. I went straight to my brother's office. Seeing my haggard appearance and sunken eyes, he questioned me with concern. I said nothing. I just silently closed his office door and placed the stack of letters and the key on his desk. "Read it," I said in a hoarse voice. Xavier, surprised, picked up the first letter. As he read, his expression changed from surprise to astonishment, and then to shock. He read every letter, and the hand holding the paper began to tremble. When he finished the last letter, he slumped into his chair, staring into space with lost eyes. "No, it can't be," he muttered, shaking his head over and over. "Our mother is Carmen. Who is this, Adrian?" "I thought so too," I said bitterly. "But brother, look at this handwriting. It's identical to the one on Clara's birthday card." I showed him the photo of the card I had taken with my phone. Xavier stared at both handwritings. The last shred of doubt in his eyes vanished. He covered his face with his hands, and his broad shoulders shook. For the first time in my life, I saw my always strong and steadfast brother look so fragile and helpless. We sat in silence for a long time, each lost in our own confused thoughts. The past we knew, the mother we loved, it had all suddenly become a big question mark. "So, Mom Carmen." Xavier lifted his head, his voice hoarse. "She wasn't our biological mother. She raised us, loved us. Why did she hide this from us?" "I don't know." I shook my head. "But I believe she had her reasons. Mom Adrian said she had to leave, that she couldn't stay. Something terrible must have happened. A car accident." That clue came back to my mind. Mom Adrienne said Mom Carmen saved her. "Yes. The secret must be in that car accident," Xavier agreed. I looked my brother straight in the eye. "We have to find out the truth. Not just for us, but for both of our mothers." Xavier nodded, his gaze becoming much more determined. "You're right. We have to find out exactly what happened 25 years ago." Our investigation began with the vague clues from the letters, the car accident, the date, and the name, Adrian. Thanks to Xavier's social standing and David's police contacts, it wasn't too difficult to reopen the old case files, covered in the dust of time. A few days later, we got the accident report. It was a terrible crash in the Rocky Mountains. A luxury car lost control and plunged off a cliff, exploding. According to the report, 4 people were in the car: the CEO of the Rivers Jewelry Group and his wife, and the driver and his wife. All 4 were concluded to have died. Rivers Jewelry Group. That name stunned Xavier and me. It was an empire that had once dominated the American jewelry industry but mysteriously collapsed shortly after its CEO's death. "Wait a minute," Xavier said. "Rivers. I remember. Our father worked at Rivers before founding Sawyer Developments. He was the CFO there. Another coincidence." Everything seemed to be connected. "But the report says all 4 died," I said, puzzled. "So who is Mom Adrian, and why did she say Mom Carmen saved her?" "That's the key," intervened David, who was sitting with us. He pointed to a part of the autopsy report. Of the 4 bodies found, one was burned so badly it was unrecognizable. Based on some bone fragments, they could only confirm it was a woman. And people assumed it was the wife of the Rivers CEO, Mrs. Adrienne. That means, I held my breath, it's very likely that woman wasn't Mrs. Adrienne. Mrs. Adrienne survived the accident, David concluded. And it's possible the person who saved her was our mother, Carmen. But for some reason, she chose to become a dead person in everyone's eyes and live another life abroad. But why? Why would a woman with status, money, and everything abandon it all, even her 2 children? This accident, Xavier mused, was it really an accident? Or was it murder? My brother's question silenced the room. If it was murder, who was the mastermind, and why did Mom Adrienne have to flee? At that moment, David's phone rang. It was an old colleague from the NYPD. He stepped out to answer and returned with a very serious expression. New information, he said. I had them check the list of senior executives at the Rivers Jewelry Group from that time. Guess who was appointed acting CEO right after the death of CEO Rivers and his wife? Who? Xavier and I asked in unison. It was him. David's voice became firm. The CEO of Apex Holdings, Mr. Morales. That name appeared once again. Our family's old enemy, the man who drove our father to his death. A wave of nausea and anger rose in my throat. This can't be a coincidence. Xavier slammed his hand on the table. Morales, our father, Rivers Jewelry, and that car accident. There has to be a connection. A dark and terrible picture began to take shape. A conspiracy hidden for 25 years. A crime that not only claimed several lives but also tore a family apart. And now, by chance, we seem to be getting closer to the heart of that secret. The search for our roots had unexpectedly turned into the pursuit of the truth in a multiple murder case. And the most likely suspect was our family's arch-nemesis. The name Mr. Morales was like the key that unlocked a dark door to the terrible secrets of the past. All the events now coalesced into a terrifying hypothesis. Mr. Morales had not only driven our adoptive father to his death to seize Sawyer developments, but it was highly probable that 25 years earlier, he was behind that terrible accident to devour the entire Rivers Jewelry Group. If that's true, Xavier gritted his teeth, he's not human. He's a devil. But this is all just conjecture for now, David said, trying to maintain his professional calm. We don't have concrete evidence to charge him. The case is too old, and almost all traces have likely been erased. And Mom Adrienne? I intervened. If she's alive, she's the most important witness. She'll know exactly what happened. But why did she run? Why didn't she come forward to report him? She was probably scared, Xavier answered. The enemy was too powerful. She had to worry not only for herself but for her 2 children. Perhaps becoming a dead person was the only way to protect us. I felt a lump in my throat. My biological mother's departure wasn't an abandonment but a silent sacrifice. She had to give up everything for the safety of her 2 children, living in loneliness and torment in a foreign country. And our mother, Carmen, who raised us, was also part of that sacrifice. She lived her whole life with that secret locked in her heart. What do we do now? I asked, looking between David and Xavier. Go to Switzerland to find Mom Adrienne, I suggested. No, David and Xavier opposed almost in unison. It's too dangerous, David explained. Mr. Morales is an old fox. His information network is everywhere. If he finds out we're investigating, he won't hesitate to use any means to silence us, just like he did with your father. Besides, we're not sure if Mom Adrienne even wants to see us. The last letter was written 5 years ago, and no one knows her current situation. David's right, Xavier continued. What we need to do now is look for evidence here first. The safe deposit box key is the most important clue. It's very likely that the fortune Mom Adrienne left contains not just money, but something that can expose Mr. Morales' crimes. But that's a Swiss bank, I said worriedly. Their bank secrecy laws are the strictest in the world. Even with the key, I don't think I can just go and open it myself. Leave it to me, Xavier said with a determined look. I have a lawyer friend who specializes in international law. I'll ask him to find a solution. It might take time, but it's not impossible. While Xavier handled the Swiss matter, David and I decided to start from another angle, finding former employees who worked at the Rivers Jewelry Group at the time of the accident. 25 years is a long time, but surely there were still people who knew what happened. People who had to stay silent due to oppression, bribery, or threats from Mr. Morales. Our search was very difficult. Many people had moved, many had passed away. Those who remained, upon hearing the names Rivers Jewelry and Mr. Morales, all shook their heads in fear and refused to speak. Mr. Morales's power and cruelty had cast a shadow so large it had oppressed them for decades. After several days of desperate searching, we finally got a lucky break. We found Mr. Paul, the retired former chauffeur for the Rivers family. He was now a frail old man living alone in a small house in the suburbs. When we arrived, he was sitting on his porch, staring into the distance with sad eyes. At first, he also refused to talk, But when I showed him the photo of Mom Adrian and told him my identity, his old eyes filled with tears. "Miss, are you Miss Isabella?" he asked in a trembling voice. When I nodded, "Mr." Paul broke down in tears. "My God. You're alive." I thought the entire president's family. He invited us into his house. After calming down, he began to tell the story of 25 years ago, a story he had kept in his heart like a nightmare. "The day of the accident, Mr." Paul said, his voice shaking, "I was supposed to drive that car. But that morning, the then vice president, Mr. Morales, suddenly sent me to another state on an errand. He said it was urgent and sent another driver in my place. He was a young kid who had just started. I didn't know him well. When I heard the news of the accident," he continued, "I felt something wasn't right. That was the president's car. I checked it every day. It was impossible for the brakes to fail. I tried to tell the police, but no one believed me. They said I was rambling from grief. And a few days later, Mr. Morales sent someone to give me a large sum of money and threatened me that if I kept talking, my family wouldn't be safe. Out of fear. For my children, Mr. Paul lowered his head, his voice filled with regret. I had to keep silent. I took the money and left the job. For these 25 years, I haven't slept a single peaceful night. The remorse and guilt have constantly tormented me." Mr. Paul's testimony was living proof that the accident was not a coincidence but a meticulously planned conspiracy. Mr. Morales, Mr. Paul added, was not only cruel but also very distrustful. He always had a small tape recorder installed in the president's office to monitor all his conversations. I once happened to see him secretly changing the batteries. A flash went through my mind. A tape recorder. If it was still there, it was very likely that it had recorded important conversations, evidence that could expose Mr. Morales's crimes. But where is that office? The Rivers Jewelry Group no longer exists. Their old headquarters must be owned by another company now. When we felt lost, Mr. Paul provided another valuable piece of information. After the president's death, Mr. Morales sealed his entire old office. He said it was to preserve his memories, but I know he was scared. Scared that someone would find something inside. That room is still intact, on the top floor of the old Rivers building. All the clues seem to converge at one point, a room sealed for 25 years that could hold the black box of the entire case. But how could we get into such a heavily guarded place, owned by another corporation? The old Rivers building was now called the Golden Tower, standing in the city center like an impregnable fortress. Infiltrating it, especially the sealed room on the top floor, was a nearly impossible mission for ordinary people like us. "This can't be done through normal channels," David said after circling the building. "The security system here is state-of-the-art. Surveillance cameras everywhere, guards patrolling 24/7. Access to each floor requires a key card. Getting in through the front door is impossible." While we were racking our brains, we finally received a call from Xavier, who had been silent for several days, with important news. I spoke with my lawyer friend. He says that as biological children, we have the full right to request information about our mother's safe deposit box at the Swiss bank. But the process is very complicated and will take at least a few months. But he discovered something interesting. 5 years ago, right around the time Mom Adrian sent her last letter, someone else tried to access that safe deposit box but failed due to lack of identification documents. "Who?" I asked anxiously. "It was Mr. Morales's people." A chill ran down my spine. He also knew about the existence of that safe deposit box. He had been looking for it for years. This confirmed even more that there was something inside that threatened him, and it also meant we didn't have much time. If Mr. Morales discovered we were investigating, he wouldn't hesitate to act first. The urgency of the situation forced us to make a bold decision. "If we can't get in through the front door," I said, looking at David and Xavier, "we'll get in another way. The Golden Tower and our Sawyer Tower are right next to each other. The height of their roofs is almost the same." "Don't tell me." Xavier looked at me in astonishment. "No, Isabella, that's too dangerous." "It's the only way," I said firmly. "We don't have any more time. You can disable the security system of the Sawyer Tower. David has the skills and experience as a police officer. And I have to get in there. That room is connected to my past." After a long discussion, they both reluctantly had to agree. The plan was drawn up with great detail and caution. The time of action was set for 2 a.m., when activity in both buildings comes to a complete halt. That night, the city was asleep, with only the dim lights of the street lamps remaining. As I stood on the roof of the Sawyer Tower with David, my heart pounded like a drum. The high-altitude wind whipped my hair forcefully. From here, the roof of the Golden Tower seemed to be only about 15 feet away. It wasn't a great distance, but it was a chasm between life and death. David prepared the equipment carefully. He was an expert in these things. He used a special grappling gun to launch a high-strength cable to the railing of the opposite building. The cable was firmly anchored on both ends. "I'll go first," David said in a low, reassuring voice. "When I cross and secure the area, you'll slide across on the line. Don't be afraid, I'll hold you tight." I nodded. My palms were already damp with sweat. I held my breath as I watched David deftly clip onto the rope and cross the dark void. A few minutes later, he reached the other side safely and gave me a signal. It was my turn. I took a deep breath and gripped the cold rope tightly. My whole body was suspended in the night sky. Below, the city lights seemed distant, and one small mistake could send me falling. But the thought of my mother, of the truth waiting for me on the other side, gave me strength. When my feet touched the railing of the Golden Tower, David rushed to help me. "You made it," he whispered proudly. We quickly disabled the rooftop cameras and found our way to the emergency stairs. The sealed office was just on the floor below. The old lock was no problem for David. The heavy door creaked open, revealing a space that had been plunged into darkness and dust for 25 years. We turned on a small flashlight, and the dim light swept across the room. Everything was as Mr. Paul had described. The desk, the bookshelf, the set of sofas all covered in a thick layer of dust. The stale air smelled of time. According to Mr. Paul, the tape recorder was hidden behind a large oil painting on the wall. David carefully took down the painting. Sure enough, an old cassette recorder was cleverly installed in a small recess in the wall. "Will it still work?" I asked worriedly. "It's hard to say," David replied, "but let's take it anyway." While David dismantled the device, I started searching further. I intuitively felt there had to be something else in that room. The light from my flashlight swept across the bookshelf. Hundreds of old leather-bound books, mostly on management and law. I suddenly remembered a habit of my adoptive father. As a CFO, he also always carried a small notebook where he jotted down the most important things, the secrets he didn't want anyone to know. Would CEO Rivers have a similar habit? I started pulling out books one by one, flipping through the pages quickly. And when I picked up a thick law book titled Justice and Truth, I noticed it was strangely heavy. Opening it, my heart stopped. The inside of the book was hollowed out, leaving a space just big enough for a small black leather-bound notebook. I picked it up with trembling hands. "This is it. It has to be." Just then, we heard footsteps and a faint murmur of voices from the hallway. "Check the rooftop area carefully." I think I saw a suspicious shadow. My heart dropped. We had been discovered. The building's security guards were on their rounds. Our way back was blocked. We were trapped in this secret room. The footsteps in the hallway grew closer. The light from the security team's flashlights seeped through the crack under the door, creating ghostly shadows in the dusty room. A knot formed in my chest, and a cold sweat ran down my back. If we were caught here, with this evidence in hand, our entire plan would be ruined. We would be charged with trespassing, and the notebook and recorder would never see the light of day. David motioned for me to be silent. He quickly turned off his flashlight and pulled me behind a huge old filing cabinet. We held our breath, trying not to make the slightest noise. We heard the jingle of a key in the lock. My heart was about to burst. "They're coming in. This room has been sealed for a long time. Who would go in here?" one voice said. "Better safe than sorry," another replied. "Lately, the boss has been telling us to keep a close eye on this area." The boss had to be someone working for Mr. Morales. Even after so many years, he was still having this place watched. That confirmed even more that he knew very well what was hidden inside. The lock clicked, and the door creaked open. A dazzling beam of flashlight light swept across the room. David and I practically stopped breathing, pressed against the cold filing cabinet. Fortunately, the cabinet was very large, and we were hidden in the deepest corner. "See, there's nothing here, just dust and cobwebs," the first voice said again. "Come on, let's check other places." They lingered at the door for a few more seconds, the light sweeping the room one last time, and then the door slammed shut. We heard the lock click again, and the footsteps receded. We were safe, at least for now. I let out a sigh of relief, feeling my strength fail me. David motioned for me to wait a little longer. About 10 minutes later, when we were sure the security team had moved on, he turned the small flashlight back on. "We have to get out of here now," he whispered. The way we came is no longer safe. But how? The main door is locked, and there are guards in the hallway. We were completely trapped. David's gaze scanned the room and stopped on a small ventilation window near the ceiling. That's the only way out. That window was very small and high up, barely big enough for one person to squeeze through. Moreover, it opened onto the building's facade. Outside was just a narrow ledge, barely a foot wide, running along the wall. That's too dangerous, I shook my head. One small misstep and... It's the only option, David said firmly. Do you trust me? In this critical situation, his calm and determination were my only support. I nodded. David moved the old desk against the wall and stacked a chair on top. He climbed up first and carefully unlatched the window. A gust of cold night air rushed in. That ledge leads to an emergency balcony at the end of the hall, he explained. It's about 30 feet away. I'll go first and come back to help you. You just have to stick to the wall and walk very slowly. With that, he slipped out the window and carefully stepped onto the narrow ledge. My heart leaped into my throat watching him. A strong gust of wind could have sent him falling, but David moved with great professionalism. His steps were firm, his back pressed against the wall. A few minutes later, he reached the emergency balcony safely and signaled to me. It was my turn. The notebook and recorder were securely tucked into my crossbody bag. I took a deep breath, trying not to look down. My legs trembled as I stepped onto the ledge. I felt my entire body press against the cold wall. The wind howled in my ears, carrying the sounds of the city at night. Don't be afraid. Just look at me, I heard David's voice from ahead. A deep, calm, and reassuring voice. Just one step at a time. I focused on David's figure, trying not to think about the deep abyss below. 30 feet had never seemed so long. When my hand finally touched the one David held out to me, I felt like I had come back to life. We went down several floors via the emergency staircase, and then found a way back into the main hallway. Fortunately, the security team was patrolling another area. We quickly returned to the roof and crossed back to the Sawyer Tower on the rope. When my feet touched familiar ground, I collapsed, panting. The suffocating escape was finally over. Back in the safety of my apartment, we didn't rest but immediately began to examine what we had brought back. Xavier had also arrived and listened to our story with a worried expression. David carefully opened the old tape recorder. After tinkering for a bit, he managed to get it to work. We held our breath and listened closely. The old cassette tape began to turn, emitting the static of time. And then we heard a familiar voice, that of CEO Rivers, my biological father. He was on the phone. I don't agree, Vice President Morales. That project has too much risk. The cash flow isn't transparent. I can't approve it. After a brief silence, his voice became sharper. I've told you already. Don't try to deceive me. I know what you're doing behind my back. If you don't stop, I will reveal everything to the world. The call ended, and my heart was pounding. This was proof of the conflict between my father and Mr. Morales. But the next recording truly stunned us. This time, it was Mr. Morales' voice. He was talking to someone. The old man knows everything. We can't let him live. A car accident. Yes, it has to look like an accident. His family. Take care of all of them. Don't leave a single one. And then, Rivers will be ours. A confession recorded 25 years ago. An undeniable confession. At the same time, I opened the black leather-bound notebook. Inside were not only records of Rivers Jewelry's business transactions but also short journal entries from my father. He wrote about his anxiety upon discovering Mr. Morales's conspiracy, his unease at feeling watched, and his infinite love for his wife and 2 young children. And on the last page, there was a line written hastily with a special ink, an ink visible only under ultraviolet light, a prudent habit of finance professionals. Xavier and I knew it. We quickly turned off the lights, and David shone a small UV flashlight he always carried onto the paper. The writing appeared. All original evidence, contracts, account statements is in the Swiss bank safe deposit box. Number XYZ. I have entrusted the key to Carmen. If anything happens to me, trust her. Carmen will know what to do. Everything became clear. Mom Carmen not only raised us but was the trusted person to whom my father had entrusted the mission of protecting the most important evidence, the inheritance, and the future of his 2 children. The love and sacrifice our 2 mothers showed us were immense and grand. Tears welled up again, but this time they were tears of gratitude and pride. We now held in our hands the confession of the past, the clue to the decisive evidence stored in Switzerland, and Mr. Morales's current crimes. The plan for the final counterattack, the decisive battle, was about to begin. The net of justice had been tightly woven. All that was left was for the biggest fish to fall into it himself. With irrefutable evidence in our hands, we knew the hour of final judgment was very near. But we were also aware that confronting a cunning old fox like Mr. Morales required not acting rashly. One small mistake could give him the opportunity to turn the tables and erase all traces. "We need a flawless plan," Xavier said with a firm expression. "We have to hit him by surprise, without giving him any time to react." The plan was drawn up with the three of us participating. Xavier, with his position in the business world, would deliver the decisive blow in the commercial arena. David, with the support of his trusted colleagues, would handle the legal aspect, leaving him no escape. And I would confront him directly, becoming the spark for the bomb that was about to explode. The first step was to resolve the matter in Switzerland. With the recording and the notebook as evidence, and the cooperation of the American police, Xavier's lawyer friend quickly convinced the Swiss bank. They agreed to open the safe deposit box, but on the condition that I was present and the process was supervised by both parties. A week later, Xavier and I were in Zurich, Switzerland. The bank's vault was cold and silent. When the familiar metal box was placed on the table, my heart pounded again. Mom Carmen's key slid smoothly into the lock, and with a turn, the box clicked open. Inside, there was no money or jewelry, but a thick stack of documents carefully wrapped in plastic. They were all the originals of the ghost contracts, the bank statements, recording illicit money flows, and all the secret agreements Mr. Morales had used to take over River's jewelry. Each document bore his handwritten signature. This was the ultimate weapon, the final sword that could end that demon's career. With the lawyer present, we made copies of all the material and immediately sent them to David. Everything was ready. Upon our return to the United States, the atmosphere was tense. Mr. Morales, after the failed intrusion attempt at the Golden Tower, seemed to have smelled danger. He began to exhibit defensive behavior. The number of his bodyguards doubled, and all his meetings were strictly controlled. "He's trying to erase his tracks and move his assets," David reported in an emergency meeting. "We have to act before it's too late." D-Day was set. It was the day of the Apex Holdings annual general meeting, a major event that brought together the entire management, major shareholders, and the media. It would be the perfect stage for us to end this play. That morning, I chose a deep red dress, a color symbolizing power and determination. Xavier wore his usual elegant suit, but in his eyes was an unusually steely resolve. We attended not as competitors but as guests of honor, a surprising move Xavier had arranged beforehand through some shareholders favorable to Sawyer developments. The convention center's auditorium was packed. Mr. Morales sat at the head of the stage, still maintaining an expression of confidence and authority. He was giving a passionate speech about Apex Holdings' achievements and its ambitious future plans, a perfect speech from a competent leader. When his speech ended to thunderous applause, Xavier gave me a signal. "Now." "Excuse me," a voice boomed from the door. It was David, entering in uniform with an investigation team. "Mr. Richard Morales, CEO of Apex Holdings, we are here to execute an emergency arrest and search warrant in connection with charges of organized murder and misappropriation of assets." The entire hall was stunned, and all cameras instantly swiveled towards the stage. Mr. Morales leaped to his feet, his face changed, but he tried to maintain his composure. "What are you talking about? There must be some mistake. I am an honest businessman. There is no mistake, Mr. Morales," I raised my voice as I walked up from the audience. All eyes turned back to me. "Or do you need me to remind you of the car accident that took place in the Rocky Mountains 25 years ago?" Upon hearing this, the composure on his face completely crumbled. He looked at me, and in his eyes were hatred and astonishment. Xavier also stood up and walked onto the stage. He held a stack of documents in his hand. "And also what you did to my father. The time has come for you to pay for all your crimes." Xavier signaled the tech crew, and on the giant screen behind Mr. Morales, instead of growth charts, images of documents, contracts, and bank statements appeared. At the same time, the recording of Mr. Morales's own voice, ordering the elimination of the entire Rivers family, echoed throughout the hall. "Turn it off. Turn it off now." Mr. Morales roared like a wounded beast, running crazily towards the control panel. But it was too late. All the evidence had been revealed before hundreds of people. Before the cameras of the entire country. David and his colleagues quickly moved in and put him in handcuffs. "Richard Morales, you are under arrest." The The golden empire, built on the blood and tears of others, collapsed in an instant. Standing on the stage, I watched as the enemy of two families was led away. I felt no jubilation, but a strange, light relief. Justice had finally been served. Mom, Dad, are you watching? We did it. In the midst of it all, a woman ran out from the crowd and knelt at my feet, crying inconsolably. It was Mr. Morales's wife, Linda. Miss Isabella, please, forgive my husband. He was just too ambitious. I looked at the poor woman before me and then looked out the window. The sky was still blue, the sun was still warm, and life would go on. But there are some mistakes that can never be forgiven. The case of the Apex Holdings collapse caused a huge shock not only in the business world but throughout society. The crimes hidden for 25 years finally came to light. The media reported and analyzed Mr. Morales's cruelty and cunning day after day. He went from being a successful entrepreneur, an example of self-made success, to the embodiment of evil in an instant. With irrefutable evidence, Mr. Morales was sentenced to the maximum penalty for his crimes. His accomplices, the subordinates who had aided him for years, were also brought to justice and received the punishment they deserved. After the trial, our lives gradually returned to normal. Sawyer Developments, after eliminating a dishonest competitor, experienced spectacular growth, becoming a company not only financially strong but also respected for its business ethics. Xavier, after avenging his father, seemed to have a huge weight lifted from his shoulders. He became more cheerful and open, spending more time with his small family. As for the Rivers Jewelry Group, as the sole legal heirs, Xavier and I decided not to keep it. It was stained with too much blood and tears. We decided to sell all the group's assets. A portion was used to compensate the victims and their families who had been harmed by Mr. Morales's illegal practices. The rest was used to create a charitable foundation called the Adrian Carmen Foundation, a foundation to help orphans and women in difficult situations. It was the best way to honor and thank our two great mothers. A year after the big case closed, I received a letter, not an email, but a handwritten letter from an address in France. The handwriting was much weaker, but I recognized it instantly. It was Mom Adrian's handwriting. My dear children, Xavier and Isabella. When you read this letter, Mom will be in a very distant place. From the explosion at the wedding to the final trial, Mom saw everything. You were so brave and strong. Mom is very proud of you. I know you may never forgive the mother who abandoned you for decades, but truly, I had no other choice. Faking my death back then was the only way to protect you from the clutches of that demon. I had to live with torment, nostalgia, and guilt, but knowing that you were growing up safely under the love of my sister Carmen made all my sacrifice worthwhile. Now that the wicked man has paid for his crimes, the heavy burden on my heart can finally be released. I believe I can now leave in peace and reunite with your father. Be happy, my children. Live a truly meaningful life in the name of your mother and father. I love you very much. Mom Adrienne. Along with the letter was my mother's death certificate. She had passed away just a few days after Mr. Morales's trial ended. Xavier and I held each other and cried. They were tears of sadness, but also of understanding and peace. We could finally call her Mom with peaceful hearts. My life, after so many storms, finally found a quiet harbor. David and I decided to have a small, warm wedding in Napa Valley, where our love began. On the wedding day, instead of a lavish wedding gown, I chose an elegant silk dress in a soft pink color, simple and pure. In my hand, instead of a bouquet, I held tightly to the hand of David, the man who had accompanied me through the most difficult times. Xavier watched me with a happy smile, his eyes shining with joy. Clara, in a beautiful princess dress, scattered rose petals along the path we walked. Amidst that warm atmosphere, we had a special guest. It was Mr. Paul, the old chauffeur. He brought us a small gift, an old photo of my biological parents in a simple wooden frame. Miss, I wish you all the happiness, he said in a trembling voice. I accepted the gift, my heart full of emotion. The past was over, but the good memories and good feelings would last forever. That evening, as the sun set over the Napa Hills, David and I stood side by side, looking at the distant horizon. A new chapter of life, a new life full of love and hope, was opening before us. I knew that from now on, no storm could knock me down, because by my side, there will always be people who love me unconditionally. And I believe that somewhere up high, my three parents will be watching over and blessing us with a smile.